This is the Rest of Everest video podcast, an almost unabridged expedition experience.
Hi everyone. Well, I tried my first Rest of Everest live streaming experiment on YouTube last night, and to be honest, I had a bunch of technical errors broadcasting what was otherwise a stellar event. The event was a fundraiser for Z Foundation, a nonprofit that funds all kinds of interesting projects in remote Himalayan villages. The keynote speaker last night was my friend Alan Arnette, who gave a wonderful presentation on his successful fall 2013 climb of the 8th highest mountain in the world, Manaslu. Alan was followed by an incredible preview of 16-year-old Matt Moniz's expedition this spring to summit Cho Oyu, Lhotse, and Everest, all in sequence. Oh, that's right, I did say 16-year-old Matt Moniz. The evening closed with an inspiring presentation by Z Foundation co-founder Jim Nowak, showing some examples of the incredible work being done by his organization. Since many of you couldn't see the stream, I'm presenting it here in its entirety with all the technical difficulties in the beginning edited out. I think you'll really enjoy it. So, let's begin with Alan Arnette's Manaslu presentation, already in progress.
Are fantastic. I love the kids of Nepal, Pakistan, in Tanzania, all around the world. They're always just so friendly. They're willing to talk to you, thanks to a lot of foundations that like to see that their schools and education. You know, it used to be when the first time I went to Nepal in 1998, they asked for 97. The kids asked for dollars or rupees or candy or chocolate. Now they ask for But now the kids ask for pens, writing pens for school. So I always try to carry over a collection of big pens and writing paper and give it to the local school when I go on these expeditions, because they desperately need that type of just basic school supplies. And I think it's really cool that these kids are now asking for that instead of candy and money. Here we are going up higher in the waterfalls. So I was starting to talk about the heat and the humidity. So this is the end of the monsoons. And so what our typical schedule would be that we would get up in the morning at around sunrise, and we would have breakfast, and then we would start walking for about, I don't know, anywhere from 3 to 5 hours. And so the group I went with, I'll tell you more about Altitude Junkies later, but the cook there insisted on stopping for lunch, and he would do a full, hot, cooked meal. So we would then spend 2 hours having this great lunch, and then we would walk another 3 or 4 hours to get to our next camp. Well, it's unbelievably hot. And so you start walking, and literally within 5 minutes, you are soaking wet with sweat. At first it's uncomfortable, but then you kind of embrace it, and what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Is that the right saying? And so we start heading up higher, and it's just hotter and hotter every day. Well, thankfully, the clouds, as you can see up here, kept the sun from being too oppressive. But, it's hot, it's humid, there's leeches, you're sweating. Did I mention leeches? I mean, it's just. But there's also a building boom going on in this whole area of Nepal. This is a very undeveloped area, and this is very similar to what the Z Foundation does, working in another part of Nepal and putting in infrastructure. Clean water is a real problem in these places. Sanitation is a real problem. And also education. And so this area really reminded me of Cooney back in the middle 80s. I know a lot of you, Jim was there when his first trip was in 88. And so it really changed a lot. That video is showing several girls that are carrying rocks. And everything these girls and women, they carry the rocks back down to those villages. And so they cut them now in bricks or whatever material, build everything by hand. And so again, there's electricity, but there's no towers, there's nothing really modern. This is all done completely by hand. And so need infrastructure developed huge part of all, especially the sanitation and clean water. Disease ran out a lot of hospitals in these areas. So these are the areas that as more trekkers come, they need infrastructure to really be built out. And the Foundation does a whole lot. But I love this particular picture because here's this guy, he's chiseling out these rocks. And look at this, these walls are completely perpendicular to each other, parallel, right angles, and all done just using the eye and these rudimentary tools. It's really impressive. Again, we start going higher up toward the Lhotse Pass. See, this is a very typical scene, seeing women carrying these baskets full of rocks or goods, or working in the fields, the barley fields. Lots of waterfalls, lots of animals, yaks and chickens and hens and, I don't know, cows and these guys.
Go on.
I said go on, as if he wasn't going to go on. Yeah, so, you kind of give these guys the right of way. Later on, we figured out what the problem was with these particular dudes. I think they got a whiff of this upstream, kind of a water buffalo or something, and the locals, nothing goes to waste in Nepal. So we stopped and watched these guys harvest this poor guy. Again, going higher, a lot of chortens and rock gates to show into town. Here's the greeting committee. A lot of dogs. They love to bark at night. Here's our intrepid team stopping at one of our lunch breaks. This is a Nepali version of a refrigerator. Got beer and Cokes. Actually, it wasn't too bad. It was about $3 for a beer. So that's really not bad in the middle of nowhere. Here I am kind of trying to clean up a little bit. It was a hot springs. So, I'm soaking wet anyway, so I thought, I'd take advantage of the hot water and kind of clean up a little bit. Well, here's our team. We had a very small team. Let me do a quick introduction. This was Damien from Belgium, Dan from Australia, Louis from South Africa, Paul from the UK, PK from California, and then myself. This is Phil Crampton. Phil runs this company called Altitude Junkies, and it's just he and his wife, Trish, very small. Phil doesn't call himself a guide. He calls himself a leader or a logistical coordinator. So if you ask him, are we going to have a gear check, he just laughs out loud and walks away. If you ask him, what's the schedule, he says, I got you here. You're on your own. Basically, he does the logistics. He runs the Great Base Camp. He provides the Sherpas to help set up the high camps, but beyond that, you're on your own. But has anybody climbed with Phil or no Phil in the room? Yeah. So one of his trademarks is that he does a happy hour every afternoon. So at 5 o'clock in base camp and on the trek in, we have happy hour. So, normally you don't drink unless you're coming back down, but Phil changes all the rules. So we would have our little glass of red wine. Phil would have about 12 glasses of big red wine. And we would sit there and just, get to know each other. And in base camp, it became really a huge social event. So people would come in from other camps and other expeditions, and we all got to know each other. And it really was a great social tool, and it helped to break down a lot of barriers and help our team building. Well, we're going higher and higher, following this unbelievably raging river. And here are the waterfalls. I have so many pictures of waterfalls that I really tried to pick out just a handful to give a representation. And, sometimes they were 50 feet high, sometimes they literally were 500 feet high. And they were everywhere, just coming, out of the clouds and just falling down the mountains. But, often you just have to stop and just stare. And, there really was no time limit on this. Over these 7 days of trekking in, we're going again from about 1,100 feet to 11,000 feet. So we're letting our bodies acclimatize to the altitude as we get higher, but just stopping and just taking it all in. As we got higher, the foliage began to change a lot deeper. The buildings became much more rudimentary at this point, a lot more rock structures. Here's a monastery built up on an overlooking wall, barley fields down here. Look at this brick and corrugated aluminum roofs. Here's a lady sorting probably some yak wool that she's going to make into some clothing. We finally reached the little town of Samagone at about 11,500 feet. And now we've gone from the hot, humid rain leeches. Now it's a little bit cooler, so we've got down jackets on and having a little bit of coffee. Because it rained so much, we had to take all of our gear out and let it dry out. And luckily, we spent about 3 days here. There was a Japanese team that was also climbing the mountain. Every morning, they got up and did calisthenics. Kind of crazy. They were doing a documentary. It was kind of the Japanese version of Seinfeld. It was a lady named Emoto, and she was a comedian. And so she was going to go summit Manaslu, and they were doing a documentary about her. And she did summit. It was pretty cool. So now we're getting near the Tibet border, and you can start to see the people take on a whole different look. Not only the facial features, but also the jewelry and the dress and the black hair. So now this is all the porters trying to vie to get business. So remember I talked about the ladies that carry the rocks back down from the quarry. Well, they get paid 20 cents a day to carry rocks in their basket. If you carry a couple of duffels from Samagone up to Manaslu Base Camp, they get paid $20 a day. So that incentive creates a lot of chaos. Of people trying to vie to get the business of all the expeditions that are coming in. But it really goes to show that the economic value of trekkers and climbers bring to these remote parts of the world. And, they really depend upon that for part of their economy now. It's part of the overall model, if you will. But still, these places are pretty lacking when it comes down to the basic infrastructures of life, including sanitation. Those of you that have been to Nepal know that basically you poop in a hole. And it's not treated or anything else, and God knows where the water comes from. But this is inside one of the tea houses that we spent 3 nights there. So once we got to this point, helicopters are a big part of climbing these days. So we took 7 days to get to this point. Other teams take a helicopter. It's about a 36-minute helicopter ride from Kathmandu. So, you got 7 days going through the hot, humid leeches. I love leeches. Or you can take a 36-minute helicopter flight, and it's about an extra $2,000. So in the grand scheme, it's not a huge amount of money, given that you're spending $15,000 to $20,000 anyway on a climb like this. But I think it also kind of takes away from the whole experience and being there and enjoying and seeing the people and getting to know the culture and picking off the leeches. So that this was a helicopter coming into Samagone. If you fly in, you spend about 3 or 4 days there acclimatizing before you head out again. Just as we were leaving, the clouds did clear as we got our first view of Manaslu. And again, this is the east pinnacle. This is a little under 8,000 meters, and this is the true summit right here. And this is the summit, this is the plateau. And I'm going to come back and talk about the plateau later on. And I really want to get a good feeling for what the definition of a plateau is. But I got to be honest with you, I saw this thing from Samagone and I went, good Lord, this looks pretty steep. This is not just a simple walk up. This is not a easy 8,000 meter mountain. Confidence was soaring with respect to 8,000 meter mountains. My body performed well, but I'm a couple of years older. And this is a lot steeper than anything I saw on Everest. So I began to really question myself and have doubts if I could make this or not. Well, we left Samagone to go to base camp. We trekked through. This is the bottom of the Manaslu Glacier. This is the terminal moraine down here in Glacial Lake. This is where we came up the valley. We trekked in. Samagone is down here. This is the East Pinnacle. Very friendly Nepal. Welcome to Manaslu. This is base camp at 15,700 feet. Pretty typical for most base camps. You have lots of expeditions there. Manaslu is not nearly as crowded as a lot of the other 8,000 meter mountains like Everest or perhaps Cho Oyu. There were about, probably 12 expeditions this year, maybe 125 people. Of that, probably 60 Westerners and the rest Sherpa and support staff. This is Russell Bryce's Himalayan experience, his base camp, set up with laser precision across here, complete with a volleyball court. Here's the volleyball net doubling up as a drying rack. Here's Phil in front of his base camp. So here's our camp, a couple of Mountain Hardware dome tents. This was our communications tent. This was our dining tent. These were our toilets with hot water propane heaters for showers. This was the cooking tent, storage tent. These were the tents for the Sherpa, and this was all the tents for us. That was my tent right there. So, really well laid out. I've been on 35 major expeditions, and I've got to say that this was the best base camp I've ever been in terms of how it was outfitted. But unfortunately, this is how it looked most of the time. Rain, low clouds, about 35 degrees, so not the most comfortable base camp I've ever been to in my life. But it was like this. Luckily, we didn't get the 3 feet of snow that happened in 2012. This was in 2013. We only got this rain and fog. So having a comfortable base camp is really critical during the downtimes between the rotations. So here we are in the typical base camp dining tent with folding chairs and plastic tablecloths. Here's our communications tent. Phil provides these high-speed satellite modems called BGANs and also laptops, so we could do email, and I could also post dispatches from this climb. So really well thought out, very nicely laid out base camp. You had to look out for yaks coming through, but pretty comfortable. Helicopters came up here. The Emoto, she had some type of a tooth problem, and they took her back down to Samagon to the local dentist. Yeah, exactly. But one thing that Phil does is that Phil prides himself on his food. So every time I've been in Nepal, I've lost between 25 and 30 pounds every single time. This was the first expedition I've ever been on that I didn't lose weight. And part of that was that Phil, again, he prides himself on a lot of food, a lot of good food. So for example, he flies in Australian steaks. So every time there's an emergency or a helicopter has to go fly from Kathmandu up to base camp, Trish goes to the airport with this cooler preloaded, iced up with this steaks, and gives the pilot an incentive, i.e. bribe, to fly this thing up. It lands. They take care of whatever the business is. Here's the helicopter up there. A Sherpa runs up and grabs the cooler full of fresh meat, and we eat like kings and queens for the rest of the expedition. It's a great plan. So here we are, hanging around, getting ready. Before you can ever go climb a big mountain in the Himalayas with Sherpas, there's always a puja, P-U-J-A. And so this is where a lama comes in from the local town. And you put your boots, anything that touches the mountain, your boots, your ice axe, crampons, you put them here by this altar. And the lama, he creates these little sculptures, and they all have some meaning. Typically, this represents the mountain. These represent either gods or the climbers climbing the mountain. And so he reads from a 300-year-old Tibetan prayer book, and he chants these prayers. So because of 2012, the avalanche that killed 11 people, the Sherpas asked the Lama to do an extra long puja. Typically, they last about an hour. So here he is. Here's our Lama, pretty good-looking guy. And here he is doing our puja. Well, he took it pretty seriously. This went on for 4 hours. Yeah. And it's not like church. You don't sit there. You're up walking around, and you're kind of you get coffee or whatever, and sure enough, here he is. Sure enough, it started to rain. That didn't stop our Lama. This guy kept on going. Didn't stop us. We got the umbrellas out, and we're kind of going through the whole thing. Well, eventually, you end up at the end of the 4-hour ceremony throwing this barley in the air to represent the good luck, and also you take the barley and you rub it against it. Everybody takes the barley and you rub it against your face in order to represent white beards. Of course, I didn't need that, but it represents aging and living to an old age. And so what the whole purpose of this puja is to ask the mountain gods for permission to climb the mountain, forgiveness for damaging the mountain with your boots and spikes and crampons and ice axes, and also for the safety of the climbers. So again, the Sherpas will not climb the mountain before you have the puja. And regardless of what your beliefs are, it's a great experience just to go and be respectful of this overall ceremony. I'm always touched by it and always get something out of it. But this part I never have understood. So there's this great ceremony where you're asking for forgiveness and permission, and then you start drinking heavily. And so this is, you have a bottle of whiskey here. So here's Phil taking 3 shots. Everything's done in 3s for good luck. And so you take the bottle cap, pour a little whiskey in it, take 3 shots, and then you start drinking 3 beers. Then you go back and have 3 more shots. Well, by the end of the puja, everybody's just wasted. And so you take the day off, and that's puja day, and everybody's all nice and happy and has a good night's sleep. And the next day you get up, and it's time to climb. And off we go. I was in I went to a presentation, this is 10 or 15 years ago. I live up in Fort Collins, and there was a guy up there at one of the local outdoor stores. And the headline was, K2, come hear this guy talk about climbing K2. So went there, and it was scheduled to be like a 2-hour presentation. He spent 1 hour and 45 minutes talking about the trek up the Baltero Glacier to K2, which is, fascinating in and of itself. But I kept thinking, I'm here to hear about climbing K2. And probably at this point, some of you are thinking, I'm here to hear about climbing Manaslu, not the trek in. Well, it ended up at 1 hour and 45 minutes into the program, we got to base camp for K2 from this guy. And he says, well, we got there and the weather was bad. We turned around and went home. I promise you that's not what we're going to do tonight. Now we're about to climb the mountain. So here's the route, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to walk through. And here's the big picture of how it goes. We did a carry to Camp 1, dropped off gear. We went back down to base camp, went back up, spent 1 night at Camp 2. We spent 2 nights at Camp 1, 1 night at Camp 1, 2 nights at Camp 2 for acclimatization, back down to base camp, waiting for the weather window, and then we went up, spent a night at Camp 1, a night at Camp 2, a night at Camp 3, a night at Camp 4, got up at 3 a.m., and then went for the summit, and then came back down to Camp 1. So that's a very typical 8,000-meter schedule. And you're going up and down the mountain to acclimatize, to get your body to create those red blood cells by putting your body in an oxygen-deprived state that causes your body to react by creating more red blood cells to carry oxygen to your muscles. And so even if you use supplemental oxygen, you still need to go through this acclimatization process. And this climb high, sleep low routine is the time-honored way of doing it. Recently, there's some changes in this with people pre-acclimatizing by sleeping in altitude tents at home for 6 to 8 weeks. It simulates a high altitude environment. No one quite truly understands how it works. The people that use it, that convince their spouse to sleep in a tent, put it over their bed for 2 months before they leave, they swear it worked. What else are they going to say? But other people, say, I don't know if it really worked or not, but I know that this climb high, sleep low technique does work, and it works well, and it worked for us. So we start heading up. Here's base camp. We're all loaded up with our gear. The first thing you do is you go up the lower glacier. Pretty ugly, actually. There was not a lot of snow on Manaslu in 2013. But as we get higher, the views become just more and more beautiful. This is Ganesh. Just a beautiful pyramidal mountain that you can see. Here's our Sherpas coming down from doing a carry up to Camp 1. A very happy group. People ask me why I climb. That's why I climb. Look at that. Here we are. This is Camp 1 as we start getting up there a little bit higher. Got the tents all set up. You pile up your crampons and ice axes. It's where you could know them in case it snows heavy overnight. You can find them all in the same place the next morning. Here I am melting snow and making a brew, hanging out in the tent. So that's Camp 1. And this is the East Pinnacle. And so here's Camp 1. We went around this structure here, and we've got to somehow or another make our way through here. So now this is going up to Camp 2, and here's the big issue. This is Paul with a big pack heading up. This is right above Camp 1. So here's the big problem, that this is the glacier. And remember I keep talking about this is supposed to be this achievable 8,000-meter mountain. And the reason is that this section between 1 and 2 is pretty well known. Well, something happened in the previous year, and the glacier moved dramatically. So as the Sherpas were going up to do the fixed line, they came back down. They kept saying, this is a different mountain. This is not the Manaslu of 2012 or 11 or 10 or 8. And these are people that have been on this mountain for 6 consecutive years. So here's people heading up. But this picture, I think, really captures it. This is a fixed line from 2012. So here it is a year later. The glacier has dropped. Here's a picket hanging up here in the air. The glacier has dropped. The entire route is totally different. And so they're coming back down saying, this is going to be a really hard climb. Well, you know, you're there, when in Rome. So off we go, climbing it, getting up higher and higher. So now it starts to really show itself. And again, this is the technical crux of the climb. And you can see people going up. We've got the fixed rope in. You know, the Sherpas are just incredible. These guys climb all this, and they put the ropes in for people like me to be able to climb it. I couldn't climb this mountain without the Sherpas, you know, full stop. You can see it gets pretty steep here. You can see the melt freeze cycle with the icicles. It's typical at 8,000 meters, 7,000 meters. It gets incredibly hot. So you've got to really mind your P's and Q's in terms of sunscreen and taking care of yourself, hydration. I love this sequence because it kind of captures some of the technical aspect. It may not look very hard, but watch what this Hymek Sherpa does with about an 80-pound pack on his back. First thing he does, he clips into the fixed line with a beaner and the Jumar, puts his foot up, starts climbing up, gets a little higher, more Jumar work, gets to the top to the ramp, and takes off. And that's what every single person did on this mountain that climbed it and summited it, including me. And we had to do that a few times going up and down. Manaslu is also very popular to ski. I know we have a lot of skiers here. And so there was an Austrian team that they were carrying their skis up. It's still unclear to me if they skied off the summit. They were going up as I was coming down. And they had their skis, and they just looked totally knackered. So I'm not quite sure what they did. But Manaslu is a very skiable mountain, Matt. So you can add that to your list, and Mike. But this is what it looks like. I mean, this thing is just totally just cracked and crevassed and fractured. And finding your way through this maze is a real challenge. Here's that East Pinnacle sticking up there. And, you know, you look at that, and you're not quite sure where to go. Here's the boot path over here. And I found myself going alone quite a bit. Because, again, Phil didn't dictate that you climbed with a Sherpa. So I found myself, you know, with a 30-pound pack and going through this, and I was really thankful for those 14ers, even though now I was at 22,000 feet, but my training had really paid off, so I felt very confident climbing through this. But still, there was a fair amount of route finding because some of the old lines are there, and you walk up and you don't know where to go. This was pretty typical of one of the sections. Here's one of the Sherpas doing a little herringbone footwork going up. This was a little bit of a bottleneck because it's only one up, one down at a time. So people would stop and, you know, kind of collect at the top or below to let people go through one at a time so you don't kick stuff on top of one another. This is really typical. I would get to a section like this and not clear whether, you know, you go around this corner or you go up here and you look for the fixed line, and there may be 2 or 3 in this area, and you just kind of have to use your mountain sense to do a little route finding. It was a blast. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Here we are heading up a little bit higher. Again, magnificent views. This is Camp 2. Well, Camp 2 is kind of poignant because this is the highest point where that avalanche came down and killed 11 people only a year earlier. And so here we are at Camp 2, and this is where we just came through, that technical area. And so this is where the avalanche hit. There was a serac that fell. It created a slab avalanche that came down. It took out Camp 3. It hit people at 5 a.m. They were all in their tents asleep. And, you know, typically these things, you've got your boots off, you're probably in your long underwear, and you're in the tent, and in your sleeping bag, and hopefully you're asleep. And all of a sudden, with zero warning, you know, the telltale crack, and it just came down. And this is Camp 2 looking up. And it actually did a wash. So they got some of the spray on Camp 2. This is looking up at where it came down. So here's a serac. This is actually a picture from 2012. So it came down, took out Camp 3, and here's the debris field down here. You know, it just hit people in their sleep, and they didn't have a chance. 11 people died. But the mountaineering community really rallied. Helicopters flew in from Kathmandu without having any assurance for being paid by insurance companies. People rallied, came from base camp up to try to help out the survivors. People went on search and rescue looking for, you know, people buried down in crevasses. A lot of people were saved, but again, 11 people died, and there's still at least one person, or there is one person that's still up there, one body up in the crevasse. They were able to get 10 other ones out. You know, so when you climb something like this is heavy on your mind, because we're going to go walk in their footsteps and go up there higher. And this is part of mountaineering, is the risk that you take when you climb, but at the same time, there's an element of sobriety that comes into play when you recognize that, this could happen again. So here we are now heading up on this exact same route up to Camp 3. Actually, this is actually still above Camp 2. So we did our rotation to Camp 2. We're all acclimatized. So we went back down to base camp to wait for the weather forecast. And I love this. So we get down there and we come in that night, and the next morning we get up and Phil says, well, we got our weather forecast from Michael Fagan up in Seattle. It looks like bad weather for the next 5 days. Everybody's like, oh man, we got to hang around here, for the next 5 days. Well, not 8 hours later, Russell Bryce comes over. He says, I just got a new forecast from the Swiss that says there's a small window that if we leave tomorrow, that we can squeeze it in, and then we can get back down before the storm hits, but it means we got to leave tomorrow. So now you're like going, at first we were upset that we had to wait 5 days. Now we're upset we have to leave within 24 hours. You can't please anybody, right? But, we decided, now's the time. You seize these opportunities on these big mountains because you really don't know what the weather's going to do in the future. So we got together and had a little powwow. We started working on our oxygen, make sure that we had all of our systems dialed in. This is Pasang, who was the Sherpa that I was going to climb with. And we headed back up. It was about 30 hours of rest after doing that rotation. And, people were doing pretty good. I love this picture, heading up to Camp 1 for the night. We left about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and just as the sun was setting, again, just beautiful, beautiful vistas. Back up to Camp 1, spent the night there, headed up to Camp 2, went back through that entire technical crux area again. And this time we've got, I think we carried our down suits up, so our packs aren't that bad. Over this rotation, we ferried up sleeping bags and pads and fuel and food, so we were carrying all that stuff ourselves. So now we're heading up, going through the technical crux again, just proof I was there, a little selfie. Back to Camp 2, spent the night. Just awesome, awesome views. Sun was setting, looking up at Camp 3, wondering if that serac was going to give away again and come down and create another avalanche. We start heading up. One of my teammates, PK. We get up to Camp 3, and everything was going really well. But then all of a sudden, Damien calls out to Phil, and he says, Phil, Dan's not doing well. Well, Dan was kind of stuttering, and he was stammering, really didn't know where he was, having a hard time formulating sentences. So Phil, remember, he's not a guide, and everybody's kind of a freelance environment. Everybody can do what they want to. Well, Phil went into guide mode and made a command decision and called Dorje over, one of the Sherpas, and said, we're sending Dan down now with you on oxygen. And so literally helped Dan get dressed and send him back down to base camp. And I talked to him, obviously, a couple of weeks later, and he was saying, I had no idea where I was. He was probably hours away from having a serious edema, some type of cerebral edema, at a minimum acute mountain illness. But he had all the classic signs: confusion, dizziness, nausea, lost his appetite, totally incoherent, couldn't put together a sentence. So, good on Phil for basically saving Dan's life, and good on Dan for later on not one feeling of regret or, feeling sorry for himself or, he should have given me a chance to keep going. Now, Dan recognized that what Phil did was exactly the right call. But it just goes to show how dangerous these mountains can be at these altitudes. So here we are at Camp 3. Time to go a little bit higher. Here's Louis and Paul looking good. Not a lot of down suits at this point because it's pretty warm with the solar radiation. So here's Camp 3 down here, the higher Camp 3. So now we got to come up. And this was actually, this became incredibly steep climbing. And some people started using oxygen from the Hymex team, running at 2 liters per minute at Camp 3, which is about 21,000 feet. And we're heading up to 24,000 feet. So now you start to see these lines form. And this is what a lot of people equate Himalayan climbing with now. But the reality is that at this point, when you're climbing from 21 to 24,000 feet, this is not a race. This is not a time where you're out there trying to prove who's the fastest, the biggest, the bravest, the strongest. This is now, you're moving from acclimatization, you're going to the summit. Now we're in survival mode. When you're on an 8,000 meter mountain, I don't care what anybody tells you. It's not easy when you start to get to this level of altitude. And Ryan just came back from Aconcagua, and he climbs 23,000 feet, and he'll tell you that 23,000 feet is not a 14er, is it, buddy? So that's the reason these lines start to form, is that you get a slow person here in front, and you just really don't care. You're happy to get in line and fall behind them, let them break trail and start heading up and get into your rhythm and just start going higher and higher. Well, here we are at 24,000 feet, left about 6 a.m., got there about noon. And so this is now looking up at the summit, the true summit up here. And so this is this plateau. Isn't the plateau supposed to be flat? Yeah. Like the top of Long's Peak is, I'd call that a plateau, right? Can somebody point out the flat part of this? And I got up there, I'm like going, Phil, where's the plateau? He goes, it's right there. So I go, well, I don't see the plateau anywhere. Anyway, so the whole idea was we got up here about noon, and so actually it was a great time. So we had about 15 hours before we were going to leave at 3 a.m. So we were able to rest up, rehydrate, eat, and the rest of the team slowly caught up with us, and we took off about 3 a.m. Through the oxygen in the pack. So this is the first time to start using supplemental oxygen. And I got to brag on myself. I was kind of proud of this old body. I made it up without using any O's to 24,500 feet at age 57. So you can give me a round of applause if you'd like. So I'm kidding. Anyway, so it was good though. And again, I was very, my training stuff worked out really well. So we got up at 3 a.m. and started heading off, and we were the first group to start going up. So this was going to be a quasi-simul climb with the Sherpas fixing the rope as we started heading up. So here's Camp 4 down here at the bottom. Kind of came up. This is actually steeper than it looks. This is one flat part, then it goes down again. There's actually 2 or 3 of these little bumps between the camp and the actual summit. The summit of Manaslu is kind of complicated. There's actually 5 peaks. So there's some false summits, and a lot of people have summited and claimed they summited but not really hit the true summit. And we were just absolutely focused on trying to get to the true summit of this, because it is pretty rare and it's pretty dangerous, as you'll see in a second. I didn't take this picture. One of my teammates on another team did, and she sent it to me. But this is the pyramid, the shadow pyramid at sunrise of Manaslu. Always just an unbelievable scene to see this. Sun was coming up as the sun was rising, starting to head higher. There's about 30 people in front of me, and these are the Sherpas up here. Purba Tashi, who's the Siddhar for Himalayan Experience, he's tied now with Appa for 21 summits of Everest. He's up here in front, and he's breaking trail. He's carrying about 200 meters of rope in his pack, and he's kind of looking back at people going, what's wrong with you people? You're going too slow. Come on, get going. You can see these are oxygen bottles. At this point, everybody on the climb this day was about 50 people who summited. Were all using supplemental oxygen, except for 2 people. And even the Sherpas and the guides were using oxygen. And you swapped out oxygen bottles here, went up and summited, come back down and pick them up. Well, I love this picture, and because to me, it evokes a memory. I looked up and I saw, here's Purba, and here's everybody else. And remember that Bigfoot video where they show Bigfoot walking along, and he kind of looks back? And it kind of keeps on going. Well, that's exactly what Purba did. He kind of looked back, and he's kind of like, you can almost see him going, these people, they're too slow. I'm going to fix this mountain and go to the summit. This guy went in double time, and before you know it, he had a separation of 100 yards between the rest of the climbers. And he's going at about half a liter per minute of oxygen. All these are climbing at 4 liters per minute of oxygen. This guy is an animal, unbelievably strong. Well, here we are going up. Here's Purba and another Sherpa up heading toward the true summit. They fixed the line. Now, at this point, we left at 3 a.m. This is about 7 a.m. So it took us about 4 hours to get to this point. So now it's basically kind of have to wait. And it occurred to me how kind of silly this was. I'm standing here at 8,000 meters, just perfectly still, waiting in line to go stand on top of this mountain. But that's what you do. And actually, you know what? I didn't have a problem with it. Because when we left camp, the high camp, it was about 9 degrees Fahrenheit, very light breeze. It had warmed up to 20 degrees Fahrenheit. So, you know, a little bit of a breeze. It was a perfect day. There was not a cloud, well, a little bit of a plume coming up here, but not a cloud in the sky. We knew the weather was coming in, so we couldn't dally all day long. But this is as good as it gets. It does not get any better on an 8,000-meter mountain. So I was happy to stand here and just admire and really appreciate the work that these guys were doing that would let somebody like me stand on top of this mountain. And you can see the boot path up here. Here's Pasang and his great pose as we're standing there waiting. I took a video, just kind of capture the environment a little bit. Looking back down, Annapurnas are over here. And now we start to go higher. Now the rope is fixed to the summit, and now it becomes a big issue. So the deal is that the summit of Manaslu is absolutely, without a doubt, the scariest summit I've ever been on in my life. It's about 2 feet wide, which is about, a little bit wider than myself. It has very soft edges, cornices on both sides. It drops off well over 1,000, if not 2,000 feet on both sides. So even though I had infinite belief and confidence that Purba had done his job in setting this fixed line, fundamentally, it's a piece of aluminum stuck in snow. And I had zero confidence that if I fell over, it was going to keep this old body from falling to his death on this mountain. And the summit is only big enough for 2 people to stand at a time. So, you quickly do the math. You go up to the summit, you take a couple of pictures, you look around, you can hug your Sherpa, you congratulate each other. That's about 5 minutes per person, so you can do the math. I was there at 7 a.m., and it wasn't until 8:30 that I was able to get up to the top. Well, one of the climbers with Hymex, a Japanese climber, had done this. He took this video and was kind enough to let me use it. And so this is him climbing up to the summit. And you can see he's got like a GoPro and he's looking down, so you can really get a sense for how narrow it is and also the drop-off on both sides. So that's Purba up at the top already. He's waiting for this guy to come up. He's actually not going too slowly, for where he is. But if you kicked either one of these slides, the snow just drifted off into oblivion. What you're hearing is his oxygen. He's got his oxygen mask on and the microphone and the camera. You're hearing his breathing. I believe that's Japanese for "oh shit." So he's saying, hand me the camera. And look at that view. It's just unbelievable at this point. So they got up there, and I got up there a little bit later and did my best Tenzing pose as far as my harness would let me. Took off my glasses to prove it was me for Elizabeth Hawley. Took a picture of Pasang so he could get his summit creds with the Nepal Ministry of Tourism. And then I took probably one of the best summit pictures I've ever taken in my life. This would make Ansel Adams roll over in his grave. I took my camera, which is a little Canon point and shoot, and I'm standing there. Remember, I'm on this 2-foot wide thing, and honestly, my knees were a little bit queasy at this point. So I take my camera, I took a picture of Pasang, I did a selfie, and then I looked back down, I went, oh, that's pretty cool, everybody else waiting. So I just went and just clicked it, and that's what I came out with. So not bad for a point and shoot. And then everybody's down here going, come on, hurry up, we want to come up. So I only spent about 5 minutes up here. This is so crazy. On Everest, I spent 10 minutes on the summit. I don't know, Mike, how long did you spend on the summit of Everest? About 10 minutes. Where's Charlie? How long did you spend one time? 45. Oh, wow. Yeah. But it's just crazy how little time you spend after all this work to get up to these top of these mountains. But, That's what it's all about. You get up there, you enjoy the views, you look around, you take it all in. And for me, I really just let it sink in the moment and just how lucky I am to be able to do these climbs and do these expeditions. And just the opportunity to be up there with great friends and the Sherpas and the camaraderie that you get. And it's just very, very thankful. And you just have to stop and let it sink in that you work really hard to go on these climbs. And this is one of the payoffs. But what I'm doing right now, not necessarily talking to you guys, but in my head replaying that experience and that memory and those feelings. And I have a saying that memories are everything. And creating those memories is what life is all about. And being able to stand on this summit, in this small summit, on this, arguably a difficult year in climbing this one, and to do it safely with my friends and have a friend go back down safely, I was just very, very thankful standing up there on top of this mountain. So we got to get back down because we know the weather's moving in. So I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. Started taking a lot of pictures as we head back down the mountain. Just letting it all sink in as you're going back down. Had to down climb through that technical crux area once again. Now we're actually doing technical rappelling, going down through the ice fall, through the glacier. Here I am back at Crampon Point, all loaded up with probably about, 30, 35 pounds in that pack. Here's our team trekking out, go back down to Samagone, and forgive me, but we took the helicopter out. Seven days to walk in, 36 minutes to walk out, or to fly out. And we actually flew directly over the entire area that we trekked in. And it was just unbelievable to look back down and see the dirt paths and to see the bridges and the villages where we spent the night. And just to let it all sink in as we came back down. It was also a great opportunity to reflect on this a really fun expedition. All right, so I'm going to wrap this up and move on, but I'll wrap it the way I always do with climb on. This is Alan, and memories are everything. Thanks for your attention. Appreciate it. So next up is going to be Matt, and I will introduce him as we're switching over. But does anybody have one or two quick questions about the Manaslu climb? If not, yeah. Why does everybody always ask that? My standard answer is I have lots of dreams but no plans, but that's not quite true. I'm working on something big for this year, but not quite ready to announce it yet. But I love this high altitude stuff. I'm going to do it as long as I can, as long as this body holds up. It feeds something in my soul, and I love my Colorado 14ers, and I'm going to be up on those as much as I can as well. Anybody? Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about the camera that you used and your thought process when it comes to whether I'm going to take another breath or I'm going to pull my camera out and take a couple more pictures?
The camera is a $239 Canon PowerShot. That's what I use for all these pictures. I used to haul up digital SLRs and expensive G12s and all that kind of stuff. Fundamentally, camera technology is so good today that I don't know. I mean, yeah, you can get better quality images, but I don't know. I think these are pretty good myself. And I also took all the video with that same camera. In terms of making the decision of when you pull a camera out, take a picture or not, boy, that's a hard question to give you a soundbite on. It's really situational. It's how you're feeling at the moment. I look around, and if something really catches my eye, then I absolutely will stop and can capture that image. But and I've got probably literally 20,000 pictures that I've taken over 35 major expeditions over the last 17 years. So I'm not shy about taking pictures. And my attitude is with digital cameras, get that 6 gig card and just shoot till your batteries run out. And so don't be chintzy with your photography. Okay, let me introduce Matt. So while they're getting this set up. So I've known Matt and Mike now for a number of years. I first got introduced with Matt when he and his dad were trying to climb the 50 highest points in the United States. But these guys are unbelievable overachievers. They make the rest of us look like slackers no matter what we do. In fact, the whole family does. So what Matt and Mike did was they took off and they stood on the highest point of all 50 points in the United States, including McKinley, and also in Hawaii, and also Florida. You got Florida, right? Yeah. And they did it in 48 days. So they set the world record for the high points, for the high pointers. But that's not enough for this family. So Kaylee, his sister, was the youngest to summit Kilimanjaro at age 10, right, Dee? Right? 10? And the whole family did that. Just an unbelievable, talented group of adventurers. So Mike, not to be outdone by his son, 2 years ago, he went to Everest, and not only did he summit Mount Everest in style, but 24 hours later, he also summited Lhotse Peak, the adjacent peak to Everest. And not many people did that a couple of years ago. So he really broke a lot of trail there, and again, like I said, he did it in total style. So Matt and Mike and Jim are going to go try something unbelievable this spring. It's never been done before. And with that, I'm going to introduce you to Mike Moniz.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thanks, Alan, for the kind introduction, and thank you, Jim, for the opportunity to share a quick preview of my upcoming Himalayan expedition. So I'd also like to express my gratitude to Mountain Hardware, Zomberlin, and Dynafit, and National Geographic, whose support helps really make my dream a reality. And a special thanks to the wonderful team at DZI for your tireless pursuit and improving the lives of people in Nepal. So a little bit about me. My name is Matt Moniz. I'm actually 10 days away from my 16th birthday. I'm concurrently enrolled at Boulder High and the University of Colorado. And while I really like learning, my heart is in the mountains. And so most of my life has been spent challenging myself on the big mountains of the world. So I also promise to be concise, and I'll jump right into my upcoming expedition. So in April, we're going to leave April 3rd. I'm going to take this out. Maybe not. Oh, geez. Whoops. There we go. So we're going to leave April 3rd, and we're going to try to climb Everest, Lhotse, and Cho Oyu. So 3 8,000-meter peaks in one climbing season. So I'm super excited about this trip, and it should be really fun. So it all started in the beginning in 2007. My dad actually got a call from one of his business partners, and he's like, "Hey, Mike, I'm going over to Nepal. I was wondering if you wanted to come and join me." And my dad's like, "I'd really like that, but I don't really want to leave the family for that long." So he kind of got all of us together, and he's like, "Hey, guys, you guys want to go to Nepal with me and go to Everest Base Camp?" And my mom and sister were like, "No." But I was super excited. I was like, "Yeah, I want to go." So our original plan was just to go to 14,000 feet at Namche Bazaar. And then when we got there, I'm like, we are going to Everest Base Camp. I was super excited to go, continuing the entire way, and it was a really amazing experience. So this is at about 15,000 feet, and the whole Everest Base Camp trek is you trek through the Himalayas, and you're literally looking above you, and you see these huge peaks, like bigger than anything in Colorado. And my first look at that, I said to myself, I want to climb. I knew it from that moment that climbing would be my passion. So this is like a quick little thing that I've done over the years. So in 2007, went to Everest Base Camp, and then after that, we climbed Elbrus and Kilimanjaro. And those two mountains were really, really cool. Elbrus was really windy and really cold, but at the same time, we got to do a little bit of skiing over there, and it was really fun. And then we flew to London, and we're like, let's just go down to Kilimanjaro while we're already over here. So we run down to Tanzania with my sister and my mom and my aunt and uncle. And Kilimanjaro is an amazing peak. It's really fun, really family-oriented. The culture is amazing there. So then later on that year, we're like, let's go down to Argentina to go do Aconcagua. And Aconcagua is really cool because it's, as Alan said, it's 23,000 feet. So it's a little bit bigger than Kilimanjaro. And I loved it up there. It was really fun. So after I came back from these 3 summits, I realized that I really hadn't climbed a 14er in Colorado. And so we decided to do a fundraiser for my best friend, Ian Hess, who has pulmonary arterial hypertension. And we decided to come up with this crazy idea to do 14 14ers in 14 days. And we actually ended up doing it in 8 days, but 14 days sounds a lot better. And it was a really fun experience, just kind of exploring my backyard. So the next year, we're like, let's just do something even more crazy. We really wanted to get up to Denali in Alaska, and we decided to just go do the highest point in every state, and we actually did in 43 days. So we set the new world record, and it was a really cool experience because you really got to see the whole culture of the United States. And I mean, there's mountains like Denali and Mount Rainier and Mount Hood, but then there's also like Mount Sunflower in Nebraska, which is like a little mailbox on the side of the road. So it was really interesting. I liked it a lot. So in 2011, after recommendation from a few people, we headed down to Bolivia, and we did 3 6,000-meter peaks. And if you guys have ever been to Bolivia, it's an amazing place, and I highly recommend going there to go climbing. It's probably one of my favorite climbing destinations I've been to. The people are amazing, the culture is amazing, and the mountaineering is amazing there too. So in 2012, I went back to Everest Base Camp, and I brought my sister, Jordan Zoller, who's also in the back, and 2 other of my friends. And it was really cool to introduce them to climbing and just kind of show them the sport that I fell in love with. In addition to that, we also did a speech on stop girl trafficking in Nepal, and we actually did it at Shine restaurant like 2 years ago. And we ended up raising $15,000 for the American Himalayan Foundation. And when we went there, it was really cool because we got to meet with Dr. Aruna Uprity, who does a lot of work in that area, and it was really gratifying just to see where all the money went to. And then, 2013, it was my first year of high school, and high school is a lot different than middle school. A lot more homework. So I decided to take a year off from doing any climbing expeditions and just kind of focus on school. And so I did 3 science classes at CU, and then I did a full course load at Boulder High School, which was fun, but I like climbing a little bit better. So back to the expedition that I'm going to in April. So our plan is to leave here April 3rd, and we're flying to Kathmandu. And then we're going to go from Kathmandu to Cho Oyu Base Camp in Tibet, and we're hopefully going to arrive there sometime around April 10th. And Cho Oyu is a really cool mountain. It's, as Alan said, no 8,000-meter peaks are easy, but it's one of the easier ones. It's one of the ones with less objective hazards to it. So we're going to start on that, just kind of see how I do it, 8,000 meters, so a bit higher than Aconcagua. And the big thing about this is the big problem with Everest, or the big objective hazard, is the Khumbu Icefall. So it's kind of like a bunch of school buses that are like shaped in ice, and they're kind of always rolling around, and there's a lot of avalanches that go through there. So it's not a very fun place to be. You don't really want to be there. So the thing with Cho Oyu is we're going to acclimate on Cho Oyu and try to eliminate the objective hazards through the Khumbu Icefall. So if all goes to plan, after we summit Cho Oyu, we're going to travel to Everest, and then do Everest, and then in 24 hours try to do the Lhotse, try to climb Lhotse right after that. And I've been looking at it, and if all the conditions align and all the stars really align and the whole team's feeling strong, we're also going to try a ski descent of the Lhotse Couloir. So this is just kind of a little perspective. So here's Cho Oyu over here. This is a border between Tibet and Nepal. So we're going to go from Cho Oyu, and then we're going to travel across here and to base camp of Everest, and then base camp of Lhotse. So our 2014 expedition team consists of myself, my dad, who was on Everest, and he climbed Everest and Lhotse in 2012. Jim Walkley, who's also in the audience, was on my dad's Everest team in 2012, and he's going with us this trip. And then Willie Benegas, who climbed Everest 11 times. We're super excited to go with him. And what's kind of interesting is we actually met Willie on Mount Rainier, and we met him in an interesting way. We ran out of our stove kind of malfunctioned, so we didn't really have any fuel or water, and yeah. And so we met Willie on the way up, and Willie comes over. He's like, how you guys doing? Do you guys need anything? And we're like, well, we kind of did run out of fuel and food, and Willie's been super nice to us, and we've kind of, the climbing community is really, it's a close-knit group, and it's really small. So we've kept a lot of contact with Willie through these years, and I guess none of us thought that, both of us thought that we were going to go do Everest 4 years later. So I'm super excited about that. So, thank you guys for your attention. I hope to share more about my high altitude adventures with you guys later on this year. I've learned a lot these past years, high altitude climbing. It really requires a lot of patience, persistence, courage, and commitment to succeed. And I think those are the same qualities that the DZI team has applied to their mission in Nepal. So with great pleasure, I'd like to introduce the founder and president of DZI, Jim Nowak. And he's going to tell you a little bit about the amazing work that the foundation is doing in Nepal right now. And, oh, by the way, Jim's a very accomplished alpinist in the Himalayas. He's done a lot of expeditions there, including a challenging new route on the West Ridge of Pamori. So get up for Jim.
Thanks. Thanks for being here. Appreciate Alan, Matt, your presentations, your shows, and just wanted to take you through a little bit of what the Z Foundation's been doing over the last 16 years in Nepal. We're based out of Ridgeway, Colorado, down in the San Juans, and we have 3 staff there. We have 17 staff over in Nepal, and the name Z comes from an ancient Tibetan bead. They're about 2,000 years old. They're given from one person to another, and they bestow health and protection on the wearer. That's what we try to do with our work over in Nepal, so it is pronounced Z. I went there to climb. I went there in 1988 to climb Mama de Blam. I'd never been really anywhere. We walked in on a Sunday. We summited on the following, and walked out the following Sunday. So kind of up the Southwest Ridge. This is the only climbing photo I'll show. But I thought it was the start of this big budding Himalayan climbing career. And every time I went back on the mountain, I got absolutely spanked. So there was obviously a different calling. So I went for the mountains, but I've stayed for the people. And so our work, you know, you see Kathmandu here. And a lot of people fly out to Lukla and walk up to Everest. Our work is in the Middle Hill region here. We work in an area where people go up to the Everest region and carry loads for the trekkers and the expeditions. Per capita income's about $400 a year in Nepal. Where our target area is, people make about $200 a year. Nepal's about the size of Tennessee, and there's 27 million people jammed in there. These Himalayan mountains kind of take up quite a bit of the geography, so it's pretty compacted and pretty densely populated. Where we have chosen to work, super remote, 4, 5, 6 days walk from the nearest dirt road. There's no electricity, there's nothing out in these communities, whatever. There's about 4 million people living in this pocket that get very few services from the government. Usually just about the only thing they get is teachers and posted out there. And what's interesting, a lot of times when you fly out to these trekking routes, you fly out to a destination and you walk up a river valley. But out here in this area here, where it's down the bottom edge of the Solo district and the Khotan district, there's no trekking, there's no tea houses, there's no nothing out there. And you're walking against the grain. So you're walking in and out of the Grand Canyon on a daily basis. Incredibly rugged. All wood needs to be cut by hand for folks to cook their own food. It's all subsistence farming. Everything is grown. It's super important for them to grow enough to exist for the year in these areas. Everything is carried on people's backs. This is a super highway. This is like what I drove from Ridgeway today. This is I-70 in Khotan, right here. There's nowhere you could ride a dirt bike. You can't take a mountain bike. There's no ATVs. Everything is carried, and these folks have been out a number of days to bring supplies back in. And of course, children are carried on the backs of their mother until they get strong enough to where they can walk on their own. We work in a couple of watersheds called the Hunku and the Rawa watershed. In the distance there is Mira Peak. It's a popular 8,000-meter peak in the Everest region. And this is a typical Rai house. This is the area we work in. Mostly Rai people that we work with. And one pot meal where they cook their dal bhat down here. The 3 stones are a bit of a metaphor for how we do our work. One stone is we never go anywhere we're not invited. So we get a formal invitation from these communities that we work in. 2, we never go in with a preconceived notion of what we think they should do. We work with the community to assess what is of greatest need for them, and they select that project. It builds ownership, it builds sustainability, buy-in. These are all important things because we all know what happens. Development organizations push and push and push, and as soon as they leave, everything falls on its face. And the third stone is that we don't do any of the work ourselves. We don't bring volunteers in. We actually have the communities do all the work themselves. So if it breaks, they know how to fix it. It's really important for true sustainability. And we start very slow. We have what I would say a slow-cooked development model. We start when we go into a community, which is usually a county, which is actually called a village development community. You can think of it as a county. There's usually about 8 to 12 villages in those counties. And every single village knows they're going to get a $500 block grant. And we start off very slowly, and we do a really unique thing in the development world. We want to learn from them and listen to their successes. And we start to do trainings. We do trainings on how to write proposals and budgets and timelines, how to assess what the most important project is for that community, for that $500 block grant, and to assess their local contribution, which is huge. And these are a couple of our staff members in the back working with these people in this community here. And then this would be an example of a block project, $500 bridge. It goes over this really benign-looking stream, but as Alan talked about, the monsoons, at 4 months, June, July, August, September, that's raging Class 6 whitewater. Nobody's getting across this. On the right-hand side, 100 families live in houses. On the left, 200. The school's on the left, the market's on the left, the access to health care, if they can get out, is on the left. So this bridge literally bridges the community. Great first block project for someone. Water is obviously a very huge thing in these communities. A lot of water, they capture springs, and we work with them, fence it off to keep the animal and the human waste out of the water, and then be able to bring it down to the community. Does a lot of different things. Obviously, hygiene, kids can bathe, but women walk less for water. They spend an average of 2 hours a day walking for water. They can be part of the community. The girls that have to carry water, they can actually do their homework and be part of the school in a much more significant way. So a huge impact on water, another $500 block grant. And then we go back and we assess, how'd you do? Did you assess the project properly? Did you assess the material? Did you actually assess your local contribution? Did everyone participate? How did that work? And we go back and really work on these trainings because we want to build their capacity to be in charge of their own development dreams over time. And this is not something that we can do, or anybody, in our opinion, can do by taking one project into a community and bing, they've got sustainability and they know how to do it all. It takes a long time to develop this. And at the end of that first year, out of all of those communities, out of that 4,000 to 6,000 people, the best and the brightest bubble to the surface. And we create an NGO in that community that's registered with the government that gives this community, for the first time, a voice with the government. They can talk to the rural education department, the development department, or the health ministers. So the first time they ever have a voice. And here's the board for the creative district of Sotong. But they got the same problems as other nonprofits. Anybody sit on a nonprofit that there's 12 people on the board and 3 of them do all the work? or there's a conflict of interest that happens because we're going to build 900 toilets in the community, and one of these guys has the hardware store, and he can maybe sell 2,700 pieces of roofing tin, and we have to teach him how to do blind bids. All this stuff takes time, and it's detailed, and it's nuanced, and you got to take the time to get it right. So this is what we start with, and they are an NGO in the community. And then the second year or third year, we scale up into much bigger projects. This is a building that the woman group of Sotan put together. And this wasn't the only guy working, but he's good. He's really good. But this is what the building looked like in the end. There's always toilets with this. There's always septic tanks. We have an office out in this remote area. This is a 2.5-day walk from the nearest dirt airstrip. And schools. We never build schools where there's not an existing population already. It's a very standard school for us. It's got a 4-foot rubble trench foundation, gravel that's broken by hand, and it's about 2 feet wide and 4 feet deep that the building is stacked on. 300 kids, all put together, all cut blocks, and we can build this for about $17,000, $18,000. And the local contribution matches that. For every dollar that we put on the ground in Nepal, the communities put in, over the last 5 years, the average has been 97 cents for every dollar we put in. We value that at $5 a day for labor and wood and stone at local rates. So these are not inflated prices whatsoever. Immense amount of sweat equity. I mean, I'm sure everybody here is super involved in their schools, and I am too. But if I put 12 days of labor into my school, I don't think my kids would be absent as much as they are. So it's a really big deal, and that's all part of this deal, And then one thing to really support these schools is we form parent-teachers associations. It's a 2-day training that levels the playing field. Teachers' absency in the third world countries is a huge deal. So what this does is a training where the local community members now know how to deal with the rural education department and report underperforming teachers, or teachers that are missing, or teachers that show up drunk. You see it all in the developing world. On the other hand, the teachers can express what happens when these parents' kids go to the Everest region and carry loads for trekkers and expeditions and are behind in their school for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks when they go do that. So it's a huge empowerment deal. It's one of the biggest things we do over there. And I want to talk about watching the money. You always got to watch money. From back in the Watergate days, follow the money. It's the same thing in development. You got to do it. So how we do it is we have what's called a public audit. So you can't see in this, but there's a roof here, and this is out in a public location. And there's a big piece of vinyl. And every piece of roofing tin, concrete, piping, what the local masons and the carpenters, who are the skilled laborers, directing the community what they earn, what our staff earns, and it's all listed. And this is actually Bill Keller and Dwight Mathis, a couple board members, and Ben Ayers, the Nepal country director, going through this whole process. And before we release the last draw of money, there's a public audit. We'll have 50 to 400 people at this. And so the NGO that we formed, helped by our staff, have to answer all the questions. When somebody from the crowd says, I heard there were 3 pieces of roofing tin and went over the hill to Chachalung, what's the story with that? They got to answer all that stuff. And when all 50 to 400 people have completely signed off with the project that all the money got delivered to that school or water project or community center, then in Black Magic Marker, they sign this whole sheet all the way around. They send it back to Kathmandu, and we release the last draw of money. And then we take it from the village to the public audit, and then we take it all the way to the IRS by doing an audit of our system by Gelman and Associates out of Bethesda, Maryland, and they audit 300 nonprofits internationally. And you can see that on our website. It's expensive, but it's the right thing to do for sure, and we really learn a lot with it. And then after the infrastructure is improved, it's all about subsistence farming and yield. I don't care if you're in Iowa and you're growing corn or wheat, or if you're in here in Nepal growing cauliflower. It's about yield coming out of the ground in your local area. So we've introduced things like cauliflower, broccoli, increases food security and food diversity. Also also start to see these hoop houses that they're building out of bamboo, drip irrigation systems that we've been doing trainings on. This is all tomatoes. And they haven't seen this kind of stuff being grown out here at this volume in a big way. So this is all new. And then we talk about local contribution. Putting sweat equity in this project. All this wood has to be cut out in the jungle like this. Okay. And I went out to watch these guys cutting this wood. It took like an hour and a half to cut this whole thing apart in about 5 hours. But it also took about 5 hours to pull it down. They didn't kill themselves doing it. It's really impressive what they do. And then the wood being carried is part of that local contribution. Or roofing tin being carried in 4, 5, 6 days. It's like 3 inches, 2.5 inches of roofing tin. Probably about 180 pounds. Pretty awful load to carry in the back country. To say the least. Guys, umbrellas, shoes, this style roof rain here. Incredibly tough people. Water pipe coming in to a community. Check this out, irrigation pipe being carried 6 days on somebody's back to get into, open up a new area for a field. And again, that wasn't our idea to open up that new field to grow crops. That's that discovery that has to happen because you have to find out what they really need. But like, what's today? Today's Monday. Next Sunday, that pipe would make it to the job. So pretty impressive what they do. And I'll take a quick dive and wrap this up. Toilets. Toilets are huge. Just keeping the animal and the human waste out of the drinking water is a huge deal. It's much better than opening clinics and trying to staff it and all these other stuff. So this is a really pretty styled looking toilet, but they do amazing work with it. Again, the roofing tin and the piping's got to all be carried in, part of the process. A little schematic. So it's a toilet pan in here. It's got a trap, and there's water in the community, and they'll carry it over and put it in like a 5-gallon jerry can in the side. And so the effluent goes in there, and they'll wash it down with water, goes into a huge cavity, and it usually has to be at least 3 square meters, and then it's covered with slabs of rock and vented. So the NGO that we formed, they managed all the projects after that first year. So what happens is every single house has to dig a hole at least 4 square meters. And here's a couple of guys that I came across, and then they lined the hole with rocks here and this here, so the effluent, when it goes down in, it doesn't destroy it, and it can percolate out through the rocks and go back into the ground away from the groundwater. These guys are just really smart. They dug it next to a couple big honking boulders, so they didn't have to build the rock walls. Okay? So then what happens is, and this is another kind of standard, you can see that the cavity is usually dug very narrow, so rocks can go across it, slabs, and then the effluent goes in. Well, what happened is, we call it deep development. You bring water into a community, you can have water-sealed toilets, but one thing that we found out is in Scandinavian countries, they've been using urine for fertilizer and realized 4, 5, 6 days walk away from the nearest road, people are not going to carry in fertilizer, and they're really careful and they're really concerned about destroying their soil. So these areas are now basically certifying themselves as organic in these areas. So we had these toilet pans we started to build, and it's called wet eco sand is what it's called. Sanctioned by the World Health Organization. There's a number of barriers that are put in place to make sure there's no health hazards. But the solid goes to the back. In the back, it's washed down with water. The urine is captured here. It goes off into a tank, has to off-gas for 3 weeks. It's diluted, and then it's put on the crops. And so what we see is this is called subji, and subji is used in Dalbat almost every single day. It's like a spinach. And so what happens is the urine really brings the crops out of the ground much faster. So this is subji in a test plot right next to without urine, and this is subji with urine right next to it. So we're seeing a 30 to 40% increase in yield using urine. And there's actually, Scandinavian countries have complete urine catching systems to be able to capture all the urine in these houses and bring it down. So it's a pretty fascinating deal. But it's about that discovery and working with the communities on these things. So then, this actually got picked up by Scientific American, which was huge validation for our work. We probably have the largest, we're not sure, but we're pretty sure we have 7,000 or 8,000 people in the largest wet eco sand project in all of Nepal. Really validated what we're doing. So that's the end of what I talk about Z Foundation. I would encourage you to pick up brochures in the front. Look up our website. I really appreciate Bob up there riding herd on everybody and getting those emails and those addresses. And, we send out a newsletter about every 6 weeks or 8 weeks when we actually have something we think is valid to share with people. We don't bombard people with stuff. We do one mailing a year with the new brochure, and we send out thank you letters. So if you don't want to have your name on it, you can go to the bottom of the newsletter and click off. That's great, but give it a try. There's also these, Marmot's a great sponsor of ours. Marmot's been with us from day one for 16 years. They support us financially, the social networking. We actually push this live feed out to 194,000 people today on Marmot's social media. But also, any garment you buy worldwide, look at the hang tag. There's a Z Foundation hang tag inside there after you read about your Gore-Tex and your pit zips. There's one about the Z Foundation in there too. So that's about all I've got for tonight. We appreciate people who had made donations up front. If you feel so inspired, you can do that up in the front. Stay involved, stay interested, and we'll be doing some more stuff in the Boulder area for sure. So thanks so much. Thanks to Matt. Thanks to Alan for giving their presentations. And thanks so much for your time and your ear. Appreciate it all.
Wasn't that a great evening? I certainly hope to do more events like this on the rest of Everest in the future, and I'm sure they'll be more successful from my technical side of things. It was great catching up with Alan, as always, and be sure to visit his website this spring for his annual in-depth coverage of the Everest climbing season. Just visit alanarnette.com. I hope to see more of Matt Moniz and his father Mike this spring, as we discussed hopefully meeting up at Everest Base Camp in a few months, when I can interview him and his father on camera about their amazing expedition. So stay tuned for that. Finally, thank you, Jim, for allowing me to experiment streaming to YouTube during the Z Foundation's event. If any of you would like to know more about this nonprofit and maybe even find out how you can support their efforts, please visit zfoundation.org. Thanks so much, everyone. The Rest of Everest has been watched millions and millions of times all over the world since 2006, and it's all been free, but it's not free for me. If you're a fan, then let me know. You can like The Rest of Everest on Facebook, write a review on iTunes, subscribe on YouTube, or even help me pay the bills with a financial donation. It doesn't take much, and quite literally, your donations make this show possible. They honestly pay for everything. You can make a one-time donation or set up a monthly contribution through my website. Help me out, and I'll give you a download of our film Everest: The Other Side, as well as some other goodies. Thanks as always to our announcer Marlon May from marlonmay.com, and to Wendy Wu for providing the show's theme song. Find her on iTunes or at wendywoo.com.
Thank you for watching The Rest of Everest. For more information about the show and upcoming expeditions, be sure to visit therestofeverest.com.